Welcome to the Published Author Podcast, where we help entrepreneurs learn how to write a book and leverage it to grow their business and make an impact. I'm your host, Josh Steimle. Today, my guest is Matt Beaudreau. Matt is the founder of multiple Actin Academy campuses, and we'll talk more about what that means. And he's the author of Collaborative Homeschooling. He's the founder of Apogee and host of the Essential 11 podcast, and he's an international keynote speaker. Matt, welcome to the show.
Pleasure, Josh. Appreciate you having me, bud.
So give us a little background on you, Matt. Where do you come from and how did you end up in the education space?
Kind of an interesting journey. So I'll give kind of the high level overview and then feel free to dive into any of that. But I've come out of education. So, I ended up at Stanford University actually before anything. So I've really started learning the game of education there. And that wasn't anything that I had targeted. I'd done the whole high school to college, you get your degree and you come out and still don't necessarily have anything to offer the world sort of situation, right? And I'd always been a good student, straight A's throughout the entire thing, but I never really learned anything about myself or my gifts or my passions or what I wanted to do. I was just kind of following the path laid out in front of me. So that path, I was lucky enough to land at Stanford and really got to see the game of education play out at that high level. And I say game, meaning all the way into the admissions department and understanding how the admissions process worked and seeing that it's not as much of a meritocracy as people like to think. And but working within the university, I was like, you know what, I'm actually liking kind of the speaking in front of people thing. I'm figuring out this game of education. And I think I could actually be a really good teacher and really help kids understand how to navigate that game. So they didn't do the whole, my experience of getting good grades, but coming out and still feeling like you don't have anything. And I know there's kids that come out and struggle. So how can I help? So I go into public education, was a public school teacher, which I then went into public school administration, more and more seeing the game that was playing out and not really liking what I was seeing. And the more I was understanding the game, the more I was understanding that this isn't about young people like it's supposed to be. Great people involved, phenomenal teachers, phenomenal administrators, wonderful human beings. And so I'm very, very pro teacher and administrator. But the system's not designed for young people. So I was naively like, oh, I'm going to go to private schools and that'll be different. So I was a private school teacher and a private school administrator too, seeing the same games play out. They're basically recreating a public school model. So it was all of those kind of things that led me to go, okay, I'm going to start speaking out against the system that I'm not a fan of and kind of speaking to what I thought the solutions were. And two, I'm going to build something else because now I have kids and I want them going to, through an educational process that is what I want for them. So I started doing both of those things, which then dovetailed into the speaking career for Fortune 500s as well. So I got to do that, the speaking part to provide for the family, gaining more and more insight of what the world is asking from our young people while simultaneously starting to build these campuses, which are now an integral part of this global education movement. So it's been a pretty wild ride.
So give us a little background on Actin Academy and how you became associated with Actin Academy.
Yeah. So during the kind of speaking out against what I was seeing in the game of education, I was speaking to a group of professors in South Carolina in 2014. And one of the professors said, hey, we're going to be going to, I'm going to be taking a job at UC Santa Cruz, which I know is, not too far from where you live in California. And I would love to have you speak at a TEDx that we're putting on there. And I'd love to have you speak with some of your ideas that you're talking about in terms of schooling and what education should look like in the 21st century. And I said, great. And that'd be fun. I'd be interested in checking that out. And she said, cool. I'd love for you to check out a couple of places that I think are interesting and maybe along the lines of what you're talking about. And one of the places she recommended was this place called Actin Academy in Austin, Texas. And at that point, there was a handful of campuses around the globe, but a handful, I mean, 10, 12, 15. There weren't many. So she said, go visit them. I went to go visit them to do research for this talk. And I walked out of there and went, this is exactly what I've been asking for in all of the systems I've been involved with. It was a no-brainer for me. And so I came back home and it was like, all right, we're either moving to where one of these exists or we're gonna build one. And so now we're building we're building more than one.
And how many campuses are you up to right now?
So I have 3 right now that I personally own. The network in general is up to about 250-ish globally. And when I say campuses, that's 250, some of those being they just launched this past fall. And they've got, 9 or 10 students in a one-room schoolhouse sort of scenario, all the way up to, some of them are like the campus that I'm sitting at right now. That's a full campus of, 150-ish students with a wait list that's just as big. So, there's everywhere in between, but the network is growing hand over fist.
And to explain to people further who are listening to this,
Yep.
Who owns these campuses? Is it you or is it Actin Academy?
Yeah, it's a great question. They're individually owned. The people are usually more familiar with something like CrossFit than they are Acton, right? So you're essentially it's a similar kind of thing where you are coming in licensing the IP to understand the systems and to get connected to the network, but they are individually owned locations, and it's not a franchise either. You've got some autonomy. You've got a lot of autonomy on how you operate these things, and you do pay a small percentage of revenue. We all pay that back to the network, but then I also get the privilege of being on the governance council for the network, which is just a handful of us owners around the world that really decide what to do kind of with that money. And we take that money. Some of it goes back into marketing and recruiting, looking for good new owners, but the rest of it goes back into things like fellowships and scholarships for the heroes that graduate. And all of that money goes back to the heroes, so it's really the most altruistic organization that I've ever had the privilege of being a part of.
And the students being the heroes.
And the students are absolutely the heroes. That's right.
So you launched your Actin Academy, and then your book, Collaborative Homeschooling, did that come before this or after this?
That came after. Yep, that came after. I was in, I think, the second year that we were open, and we were just already seeing so many good things happening. And at that time, I was still speaking too, right? So I was still on the road doing 60, 70 keynotes a year for organizations that every listener would know. Some of the biggest organizations on the planet. And so based on what these organizations were asking of me and with the things they were looking for and wish they saw in these young people, based on what I was seeing happening on our campuses, based on what I was hearing about happening on other Actin campuses across the world, it was really, really obvious to me at that point that our growth was going to be astronomical. It was obvious because we were solving some problems that people didn't even realize they had yet. And I could just see it becoming more and more and more of an issue. You could tell that this is the way it was going. And so, jumping into write that book was partially about telling that story early, so that it could really help more and more people, at the early stages of this mission.
Got it. And so how did you go about writing the book? What was your process like?
Yeah. So I actually reached out to a gentleman I had worked with, had become loosely familiar with first from reading one of his books, which I thought was one of the best books in education that I had read in a long time. And so there was a book called Education of Millionaires, and the author was a man named Michael Ellsberg. Michael Ellsberg is a wildly successful author and copywriter. His dad, Daniel Ellsberg, is I would say infamous. I won't even necessarily say famous. He's infamous. If you've ever seen the movie The Post with Tom Hanks, that entire thing is about Daniel Ellsberg and the Vietnam Papers and all of that, right? So Michael comes from that lineage. And so I had reached out to him and said, I love what you did here. Do you know anything about Actin Academy? He's like, no, tell me more. What is that? And so as I explained to him, he's like, we need to start spreading the word on this. So let's collaborate on this. How can I help you? And so that really turned into these kind of weekly sessions where I jump on with Michael and just kind of chat with him and go, okay, here's kind of where I'm writing and here's where I'm going with this. And what do you think? And he's like, okay, maybe expand on this. And so he was really, he kind of coached me through that whole thing of telling that story where we currently were. So it was a long process, a tedious process. I feel like I'm a decent communicator. But I get energized from communicating verbally. Things like this, right, are just natural. Like, this will raise my energy. Put me on stage in front of, 5,000, 10,000 people. Good night. Piece of cake. I love it. It's great. High energy. Sitting down in front of a screen and having to communicate that way, I can do it, but it's a challenge for me. And that was a part of it too, is I needed that challenge for myself and just a different way to tell the story of Acton for people that would hear it that way.
Now, when I hear the title collaborative homeschooling, I think homeschooling. I don't think Actin Academy or private schools. So what's the link between Actin Academy, what you're doing there, and the title of this book and the content in it?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So understanding, I go back to understanding the game of education, right? I say that very, very specifically. There is always a game to be played. In California, where I'm located, the game looks a specific way that not every other state mimics necessarily. And so the way we have set up our campuses here, it's more around a collaborative homeschooling from almost a legal sense of the word. And we can very clearly identify how our campuses don't qualify as what California would define as a school, because we are so student driven, because the students take on so much responsibility. We're not doing direct instruction. We're not lecturing. We're not even answering questions, right? All of these things that are playing out here, we can make a very clear case. Well, okay, we're not a school. So what are we? Right. And so that's kind of the link, is like, well, really all of my students, they register with the state as homeschool. And so we're really kind of having this collaborative homeschool sort of unit. And I knew that was going to be something that became more and more relevant as the years continued to progress. I could see that becoming a relevant path in California. We've since helped launch numerous collaborative homeschool environments, some Actons, some not. And it's a way to self-organize that makes sense to a lot more people than if I just said private school, because the people think traditional, conventional school. So that's why we shifted to that.
I like that, because the title kind of forces people to ask. It doesn't allow people to think they already know the answer. They have to ask you, well, what is this? And that's necessary, because you do have to explain it to them.
That's exactly right. If you say school, everybody thinks they know what that is. Everybody thinks they understand because they went through it. So everybody thinks they understand what it is. Everybody thinks they understand how to build one, how to run one. Everybody thinks they get it because they grew up in it. So they feel like I've got the answers to it. And nothing could be further from the truth, especially when you start talking about, something that's along the lines of an Actin Academy philosophy. So,
yeah, there are times when you want your book title to tell people exactly what's in it. There's times when you want the book title to create a question, which I like that. That kind of goes along with Actin Academy, right? Because it's all about Socratic method and asking questions, right?
That's exactly right. We always say, from a network perspective, asking good questions is infinitely better than having answers.
Yeah. So the book was self-published. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
And how long did it take you from beginning to end to write the book? From the time you had the idea and you said, I'm going to do this, until you published it, how long was that?
Yeah. It was probably about a 9-month process. And that, is a product of one, just wanting to do a decent job with it, right, and really tell that story. So that in of itself, obviously so there was a lot of going back and revisions and rewriting, and I was, one of the things that I struggled with, again, from my own gosh, I'd rather just talk about this, right? It's like, okay, come on, nope, you got to be disciplined to go back in there. And so I would just discipline myself for, a specific amount of time every single week. And then in the midst of also traveling around the world, I think that same year I did 64 keynotes, and only out of the 64, I think 5 of the 64 were even in California, where I live. And none of those even drivable, right? It's like, I was still having to get on a plane. So doing all that, running a campus, there were time constraints on that as well. But then the beauty of what I was writing about too is that the heroes every single day on this campus would give me something else. Something else would happen. Some new things would take place, some, epiphanies that they got or some successes they had. And that made it even harder because I wanted to share all of it, which was impossible, right? So I also had to figure out, okay, what are the stories I am going to share? Where am I going to cut this off so that people can just at least get a little flavor of this? So.
And as you were writing the book, who are you thinking of as the ideal audience to read this? Was it the parents?
It was absolutely the parents. Yeah, it was absolutely, and it was the parents. For me, it was the parents that were going to, we're going to come in having questions of, okay, well, what does this collaborative homeschooling thing look like? I didn't want the parents that, school, one of the things we found is school is very much almost a religion in this country, with the emotional attachment that people have to how it is currently run, and based on their own upbringing. And, I enjoyed school. So then they're very attached to school looking exactly the same. And we've also bought into this, school needs to look just like this because that's what's going to get you to college, because college is what's going to get you to happy and successful, right? And it doesn't matter if you break that down and prove that all of that is completely false. People still have that religion. So I didn't want necessarily to talk to them. The people that had it all figured out. I wanted to talk to those parents that are like, I feel like there's something different. I feel like there's something better here, but I'm curious enough to know that I don't know exactly what that is. I'm kind of in that, right? I'm kind of floating in that middle where I'm going, there's probably something, and I'm open enough to go ahead and explore and not think that I've already kind of got the answer. So I was looking for kind of that niche of parents.
Got it. So once the book was done, how did you go about promoting it? How did you get about getting it into the hands of that audience, in the hands of the right people?
Yeah. The beauty of the Actin networks was really kind of twofold. One, just going to even parents that we were currently serving on campus. They were some of the biggest advocates because they're a part of that story, and they've seen the outcomes, right? They've seen the outcomes of their young heroes and the transformations that have taken place. So they were really some of the biggest advocates early on, and getting out and kind of sharing the message. But the network is so much bigger than also just, our individual campuses too. So even sharing that with the network in general and just going, hey guys, if this helps any of your parents kind of understand conceptually, it's the same thing we do with Laura's book, Courage to Grow, just going, hey, let me give you a little sneak peek into kind of what we're doing and how some of this plays out. And it was really the network at large that shared it the most and got the most traction, which was cool.
Yeah. And that Laura being Laura Sandifer, who
That's
co-founded Actin Academy with Jeff.
That is correct. Yep, absolutely. So we still use, we use those books to these days to help just kind of explain to people that are both new owners, new families, people are kind of exploring and going, well, what the heck is this Actin Academy thing?
Yeah. We'll link to Laura and Jeff's books in the show notes as well for people to get those. So what impact did you see from the book then? As people read the book, as you see parents reading it, do you see the lights go on? Do you see them say, oh, okay, I get it now, what you're doing? What benefits have you seen personally from having the book out there?
What was interesting is we were looking at it as, initially like, okay, what is the, part of it is I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to discipline myself of putting that out there. And I wanted to share all the amazing victories of these kids, right? And if I'm looking at the next kind of level of goal, I'm going, okay, cool. Well, this would be cool if this kind of helps as maybe a top of the funnel sort of thing to alert more people, more parents about what we're doing, and it inspires them to come check us out as something, as a potential partner in the hero's journey for their young hero. What I didn't realize would happen as much is that definitely created some more interest, and I know is a big part of the reason that we've expanded to now 3 campuses here in a very short amount of time, and are going to have 4 or 5, come next year, right? That definitely helped. Even more so, it helped connect me to parents who are also entrepreneurs who are going, gosh, I've really wanted to figure out a way to help my kids because I want to create something better for them. It connected more to my journey as a dad who wants to do this for my hero and build it out. And so that's been interesting to see, is that it actually increased about, this isn't the sole thing, but it helped increase our network's interest about almost tenfold in terms of the amount of entrepreneurs that we had reaching out saying, hey, we're interested in opening something for our kids like this, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is great.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to turn the tables on you a little bit. Like I said before we started recording, I'm interested in starting an Actin Academy. I got introduced to Actin Academy a few years ago through Slope School in Utah. One of my friends was sending his kid there, and he told me about this. He's like, you got to look into this thing.
That's awesome. Maddie Clayton is the owner of Slope School. He is a brilliant human being.
Yep. And even before that, I had toyed with the idea of starting a school, but I thought, because my mother was an elementary school teacher for 15 years in Southern California.
Got it.
I saw the system firsthand. I saw things that I didn't agree with through her. And of course, I went through the public school system, and I didn't really enjoy school that much. For me, it was always, why am I here? What am I doing? And then while I was in high school, I started my first semi-real business. And I thought, what do I need school for? I can just go do stuff. I can do a business. Like, I don't need school for this. When I went to college, I loved college. And so it wasn't that I didn't like education. I just didn't like that system. And I read a ton and I educated myself essentially. But for years, I thought there's got to be a better way to do this. My wife and we started homeschooling when our kids got to that age. I mean, I guess we were homeschooling them from the day they were born, but as when they reached school age, we just kept on schooling them at home. And now we've kind of got into a hybrid space where we have kids that are going to public schools and half-time public schools and full-time homeschooling. So we've kind of like run the gamut. Yeah. But all through these years, I've thought, what kind of school would I start if I were starting a school? Well, I grew up skateboarding. So that's all I ever wanted to do. I wanted to skateboard. I wanted to draw. I wanted to make videos. I wanted to start businesses. That's the kind of stuff I was into. And I thought, if I were going to start a school, it'd be skate school. Yeah. It'd be a school for skateboarders where they could go and learn how to start a skate shop, how to start a skate magazine, how to edit videos, how to do social media, how to do all this stuff around skateboarding. And the reason I gravitated towards that kind of learning model where it was something I was interested in is because of an experience I had in high school and college, where in high school, I failed every math class from seventh grade onwards. So as soon as we started algebra, I was the dumb kid. You were dumb. I was the smart kid before that. Like sixth grade, I was the smart kid. I was the advanced kid in math. I hit algebra. Nope. Didn't work because I never learned how to study. I never learned how to do homework. And with algebra, you have to study. I couldn't just go in and ace tests. So I failed every math class all the way through algebra 2, got a D- in algebra 2 and said, yay, I'm done. I passed. I'm done with math for the rest of my life. Then when I was in college, I had this experience where I said, you know what? I don't want to be an artist anymore. That was my life plan before. Didn't need math for that, I thought. But then I switched into business and entrepreneurship. And all of a sudden, I had to take math classes. And I thought, oh no, I'm dumb at math. I'm terrible at math. And now I need math. What am I going to do? So I went back and I started with seventh grade math, beginning algebra, and took remedial classes. And here I am, I'm 22 and I'm taking seventh grade math classes because I knew I had to catch up and I knew I had to go back and get that foundation. I ended up taking something like 12 credits of math classes in one semester, everything from beginning algebra all the way through to calculus in one semester, got A's on everything, piece of cake, and I loved it. And I looked at that and I thought, wait a second, what happened? Did I just get super smart in the last 5 years somehow? Like, what made the difference? And the difference was I cared. I didn't care about math before. That's right. But once it was, hey, I need this to do something I want to do, suddenly I cared about it, right?
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And so I thought, well, what about all these kids out there who are skaters and they think, oh, I'm going to be a pro skater and that's going to be the rest of my life. And then that doesn't work out for that many people. I thought, I know a lot of skaters who really struggled with school and had a hard time with it. But if I could put them in an environment where I said, look, you want to design a skateboard deck? There's geometry here. Like, we got to get the CAD software out and design the concave on this deck and how these curves are. And you need to know some geometry for this. they might be interested in geometry. They might be interested in calculus if we're designing a huge ramp that's different than any ramp that's been done before.
Exactly.
They might like writing if they're doing a skateboard magazine. They might enjoy video editing. There's so many other things around this. And so this idea of context-based education or centering education within a context that the student's interested in became my thing that I wanted to push.
Good for you.
And so now the only question is, when am I going to do this? When am I going to launch the first skate school? And I found Actin Academy while I was thinking about this. And I thought, this is the system. This is the system I want to use to launch skate school. Now, for me, I'm looking at this and saying, how do I get this off the ground? I need a building. I need funding. I need a lot of things. And I also want to write a book about it that helps me explain to the parents that I'm marketing this to, hey, this is how my school is going to work. This is what it's all about. Right. This is the way that we teach, or quote unquote teach. Yep. But what were some of the challenges that you faced as an entrepreneur getting your Actin Academies off the ground? What were some of the first steps and how did you overcome those challenges?
That's a great question.
Sorry, that's a long introduction to the
I
question.
It was fantastic. I mean, just that in of itself, I was writing, I'm literally writing things down. You're talking about, learning, why am I here? And so many of these young, I definitely want to answer your question about the challenges, but some of the things I wrote down, why am I here? And you have so many students that are asking themselves that, right? There is no context. They're seeing the game. All students, I feel like, figure out the game of school very early on, whether they do it consciously or subconsciously. Some will go, well, why am I here? And they'll not like the game, and they'll not necessarily figure out how to play the game or figure out certain aspects of it, like the algebra or whatever, right? And so, we worry about those students like they'll never figure it out. And then we don't worry about the students who do figure it out and just figure out how to play the game and just become apathetic. I was definitely that. I figured out I could figure out the algebra stuff and got my A's. I went back and took an algebra 2. It's funny you said that, because I took an algebra 2 test a few months ago. I got a 19%, almost all guesses. So I still don't actually, I got an A when I grew up. I still don't actually know it because there's no context. Or I can run 7-figure businesses, but it doesn't mean I know how to do algebra. That those things don't correlate. So what you said there, talking about self-education, which is really the only education, talking about skateboarding. And I look at, a guy that I grew up with and graduated with that you might know of, named Stefan Janowski.
Oh yeah. Stefan's great.
So Stefan and I graduated together, right? We grew up together. Graduated same high school, same year together. And, I remember his journey through school, and we weren't, like best of friends, but we were friends. And remembering his journey and just kind of being one of those guys that called out the game early on and was like, I'm going to go figure stuff out. And, and then signs this $20 million deal with Nike around skateboarding. Right. So much of what you just said was phenomenal. So I really liked hearing that story. The challenges, parents and people that, and I get the pleasure of helping a lot of new owners. This is where I try to give back to the network as much as possible. And I'm actually coming up here in 2022, actively being the one who is recruiting good new owners. So it's kind of cool. So, they ask, I kind of know how to start a school. So like, there's probably, some things around just getting the kids, and there's probably some different ways to, market on social media, but it shouldn't be, too crazy. I've run a business before. I've run this business before. So it's not, I always tell them it's not the same thing as any other business you've run. It is, in a lot of ways, it is more difficult, but it is also far more rewarding than so many other businesses. And definitely learned that through experience. My first year building out the tribe, meaning the parents that we were and the heroes that we were going to launch with. I was still traveling, doing a lot of speaking. And then when I'd come home, anytime I was home, I was having breakfast with a stranger. I was having lunch with a stranger. I was having dinner with a stranger. I was having coffee dates with strangers. And then once a week or once every couple of weeks, we're having meetings in these coffee shops, and we're having and I did that every week, every day, as much as I could. Jeff and Laura have this thing about, if you're going to get your tribe, you're going to go to 100 coffee dates to figure out your first people. I went to 200 for sure. And so that was, and because I think I spent so much time building that out, we had, to this date, it's still the largest launch in Actin Academy history with, over 50 heroes starting, and we grew to a full campus faster than any other location, partially because of my maniacism around building that out. So, finding the right people is always the most difficult part. It continues to be the most difficult part. Finding the right families who get it, who understand the mission, and who are willing to let a hero's journey actually play out. One of the things I always tell the parents is everybody loves the story of a hero's journey. You love that archetype in any stories, any movies, you love that journey. Joseph Campbell did a great job of mapping that out, and it still uses this archetype in so many stories. Everybody loves it until it's their kid who's in the throes of the hardest parts of that journey. And then it's like, okay, but now I need to step in, or, but my kid's different and our situation is different. Right. And it's not, but it's getting them to understand that and to step back and to let their hero fight and battle and slay that dragon and come out the other side. Right. So that's always the hardest part. So getting parents that were on board and understanding that was difficult. One of the sneaky, most difficult parts of starting an Actin is finding a building, because there's a lot of, there are a lot of kind of ideals that you want for, something that is an educational environment, including play space. And then there's a lot of, zoning regulations that go in depending on what state you are. If you file as a private school, there's extra zoning regulations that go into that. So that's one of the sneakier parts too. So those are the two biggest challenges starting, and then finding the right guides. Finding the guy, it's a weird thing to hire an adult. The adult has to be on board with the mission, and part of that mission is they're really good at their job when they're not needed anymore. And that's a weird thing. It's like, hey, work yourself out of a job.
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard, right? To not feel needed.
Exactly. And the best way I can, I've tried it, and there's a million different ways we can go with this, but one of the things I try to make it parallel to is, if you're a parent, you don't want your child living with you at 30 years old. You want them out and functional, not needing you, but still wanting that relationship, still wanting you as a guide and a mentor. And that's the role of a guide, as far as we've had it here, is if you become irrelevant in terms of they can handle things on their own, and they can make things happen, live, grow. They can do all those things on their own. They don't need you anymore because you've set everything up so well that they can do it, but they still want you around. They still want to go back to guidance. They still want to go, like, it's that. They still want to check in with you. They still draw energy from you, from the love that you have for them. It's that. So those are, I would say, the most, uniquely big three challenges of opening a campus. And so we've learned the hard way. And so part of what I'm getting to do is in 2022 is help new owners that come in navigate those things more smoothly, more effectively, so that they can focus on the mission at hand.
I noticed that, so I applied for an Actin Academy school a couple of years ago. I was not ready for it, but I wanted to go through the process and see what it was like, and just know what I was getting into.
Yes, sir.
So I went through the whole process. I read all the books. And that's one of the things I really liked about the Actin Academy process, bringing this all back to books, is that they make you read a bunch of books before you can even submit your application. I was like, I love this.
That's right.
Because books are my love language. And I love that you wrote a book. I'm curious, do you make your parents read your book before they can apply to your Actin Academies?
I make them read Jeff and Laura's book. I recommend that they read mine. And that's just more of a personal thing. Whether that's a mental hurdle I need to get over or whatever that is, but I make them read Jeff and Laura's. I recommend mine. Yeah.
Well, it seems like a good way of screening people out. If they're not willing to read the book that explains how your system works, are they really the right fit?
That's 100% correct. So we, at this point, again, lucky enough to where our campuses are running really, really well. The ones that I personally own. And so we'll do, informational sessions for parents, and we were getting 100, 150, families coming in every month, some of whom didn't know anything about what we were doing. So we had to start putting in extra filtering systems. So now people go to get info, and they've got a whole video series of me they've got to watch. And one of those things in that video series tells them, hey, now here's some books you're going to have to read. And they've got to do all of those things before they even get to come to the info session. And the info session only gets it to where they can then have the students shadow and they can interview and then hopefully get on the wait list or come in, you know? And so it's that filtering, and us as a network are doing the same thing for exactly the reasons you were stating. Not that we want to be some sort of elitist hoity-toity, whatever. It's like, no, man, this is so different than what you think school is. We just want to make sure you're running to this and not from something else.
Yeah, because you get somebody who doesn't understand it into the system, they're going to muck up the system.
That's correct, sir. Yep, that's absolutely it. And almost all owners learn that the hard way. You bend here and there at some point because you think, oh, okay, maybe, and almost always end up going, okay, that was a big tuition paid for me, and time, energy, whatever.
I think we run into this a lot as entrepreneurs generally, that there's always that stage of your entrepreneurial journey where you need the money. And so you bend the rules because you need the money, you need the customer. And then you end up regretting it. And you say, oh, I never should have taken that person on. And one of the things that I think is great about having a book is that often the book is the way people find you. And so they've already pre-screened themselves before you ever talk to them. And so they come to you and you already know this is probably somebody I can work with because they're coming into me and they're saying, hey, I read your book. I love your book. I want to work with you. It's like, okay, now we don't have to go through all that stuff of figuring out if we're really the right fit or not.
Bingo. That's exactly it. And so you're describing really the top of the funnel, both for, owners at campuses as well as for finding new owners, to create those, to entry, but the barriers to just illuminate the path and make it a very clear, yes, this is where I want to go. And those books are an integral part of it.
Quick break here. Are you an entrepreneur? Do you want to write a book that will help you grow your business? Visit PublishedAuthor.com, where we have programs to fit every budget, programs that will help you write and publish your book in as little as 90 days, starting at just $39 per month. Or if you're too busy to write your book, we'll interview you and then write and publish your book for you. Don't let the valuable knowledge and experience you have go to waste. Head on over to PublishedAuthor.com to get the help you need to become a published author. You've already waited long enough. Do it today. Now, back to the show. Okay. If I can ask you one more question off the record here.
Please do.
So with my skate school idea, it's not something I can just start out of my house per se. There could be like a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, but the ultimate goal here is to have a relatively large warehouse with an indoor skate park in it that is going to be a multi-million-dollar project.
Yep.
And so there's going to be that. And then we've got to have like video editing bays and equipment and a bunch of stuff. So I'm looking at an investment of, if I wanted to start from scratch and jump straight to phase 3 or whatever it is, I'm looking at $5, $6, $7, $8 million investment into this, even if I'm just leasing the property. And so obviously one of the things that I would assume that Actin Academy would look at is, okay, how are you going to fund this? Like, where's this money coming from? But if that's the end goal that I'm working to, and there can be like a phase 1 where we say, hey, we're going to rent a small warehouse. We're going to put a couple ramps in there. We'll have a room or two and stuff. Like, there's more affordable ways to get it off the ground. But if I come in with that general idea, where are some of the holes, or what are some of the pitfalls or challenges that Actin Academy already knows I'm going to be facing, that I need to make sure that I've got a plan for that, or I know how I'm going to deal with that challenge?
Yeah, it is the making sure that there is the phase 1, phase 2, phase. That's the reality of it, because you're going to learn so much in that building phase. The majority of that is going to be around the right people too. And then that's going to attract we're starting to get some very big donors and very big entrepreneurs who are very excited about what we are doing. They want to partner with specific locations that have also a little bit of a proof of concept before going. They don't want to go big first. It's more of that proof of concept, and then the big comes. It's running that phase 1, phase 2, figuring out the pitfalls, figuring out the right tribe. If you go straight, even if you had all the money in the world and you went you went straight to that phase 3 big giant build out, you're going to have so many people who come in super, super interested and fired up and emotionally ready, but then they're not going to actually want to either pull the trigger or they're going to leave early. And it's going to put you in a weird spot of having a whole lot of overhead early without the revenue to start making that up. You want to start building it out first and get that proof of concept. The best example I can give you is, do you know who Tim Kennedy is? My partner in Apogee.
I don't know.
Okay. So Tim is probably one of the more well-known, he's probably the most well-known owner that we have, just based on his prior people being socially aware. So he was a mixed martial art fighter, was a UFC fighter, high level for a long time. He's an Army Ranger, special forces guy. He had a number of television shows that he was on. He goes on Joe Rogan's podcast quite a bit, right? So he's got kind of a brand awareness around him already. So I brought him into the mix this last year and said, hey, we're going to help you start a campus in Cedar Park, Texas, where you are. Within the first few days, it was like, hold on, this is a Tim Kennedy run school. He wants to incorporate some of his sheepdog, which is kind of his special forces guys that they go out and do. He wants to incorporate some of those aspects of, the running, jumping, shooting, military, bringing helicopters in. Like, he wants to incorporate some of that. That's badass. Here we go. He's got 1,000 people interested, literally 1,000 people interested day one.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going, I got this. Gets this whole big old building that he's ready for and all this kind of stuff. They launched this fall and they've got 40 students.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's awesome. And they're going to be great. But the thought of, hey, we're going to start up here, it's so much harder to build out and get the right people in that way. So that would be my biggest thing. And I want to help these owners get off the ground, because if I can help owners like you that have a specialty type, especially these specialty type schools, we can get this phase 1, phase 2, as we're building this out, starting to build the tribe, starting to build awareness around that. We have got a lot of multi-millionaire and billionaire donors that are now coming on going, okay, who are these high growth potential specialty schools that once we've got a couple years of proof of concept, we'll throw some money at it and really ramp it up. So it's just that little piece.
So I'm really better off starting with a pilot program, 5 to 10 students, maybe.
Starting it off small. Yep.
And make sure they're the right parents, the right students.
The right parents, understanding the vision of not just we're going to have all the skateboard stuff, but we're going to have all the self-direction, self-awareness, self-confidence that comes out of some of these other challenges around things. You can integrate the concepts of skateboarding and gamification into everything you do. That is not hard. No, it's simple to do. I'll say that.
Simple, but not easy.
Correct, sir. And then building that out while still showing, look at the greater vision of here's where we're going to go and what we're going to do. And then we can help, once we've got kind of those strong growth owners, we can start connecting at this point to more funding. And I specifically have a billionaire that I work with on bringing in money to high growth campuses and high growth potential campuses that I personally meet with often. So we're in a good spot as a network for something like that.
All right. Well, if you happen to run across any pro skaters who want to be a part of this, let me know.
Well, I mean so I want to reach out to Stefan too, but it's kind of interesting that you said that, as obviously I had no idea about your skate background, but we just submitted a proposal to Rob as well. So
Dirtic.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we had one of our girls on this campus sold a skateboard to Tony Hawk not too long ago that he took to his California Hall of Fame induction that she did here on campus. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's some crossover there. So let's stay in contact and anything that I got going on.
I ran into Tony in the airport about 2 months ago in Salt Lake City and took a photo, said hi, and I'm kicking myself that I didn't just plant the seed and just say, hey, I'm starting this skate school thing. Love to get in touch someday or something. I'm like, dang it, why didn't I say that? But
that's all right. I was
like, I don't want to be that guy hitting him up. I'm sure he gets hit up in airports all the time by people like, oh, we should start this business together.
I'm sure he does. I guarantee he does. But as Acton is continuing to move forward as a network, and as we have the Gary Vaynerchuks and the Seth Godins and some of these guys that are coming on board going, hey, wait a second, this is what education needs to look like. As we start to build out that brand awareness of those things, the conversations are vastly different, because then we can go to Tony and go, hey, look, as a network, Jeff and I can go to Tony and go, hey man, so this is something that, is one of the, we've got an owner here that is really going to build out this specialty program. How can we bring you into the mix and partner on all that stuff and make connections on that too? So no, it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, Matt, thank you so much for being a guest here on the show today. If people want to learn more about you, they want to learn more about the Actin Academy campuses that you're running, where's the best place for them to go?
Ours specifically are Acton Placer, ActonPlacer.com. And we're, relatively active on Instagram under the same thing. And then I'm just at my name, Matt Beaudreau, and most active on Instagram, probably more than anything else too, but glad to help any way that I can.
Great. Thank you so much, Matt, for being on the show.
Pleasure, my friend.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to spread the word, please give us a 5-star rating review and tell your friends to subscribe too. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and everywhere else you listen to podcasts. And if you're an entrepreneur interested in writing and publishing a nonfiction book to grow your business and make an impact, visit PublishedAuthor.com for show notes for this podcast and other free resources.